The first rays of sunlight stretched across the city, painting the tall glass buildings with a delicate golden hue. Emma Blake wasn't pausing to admire the view. She was already at Jackson Tower, her old cleaning cart squeaking softly on the polished marble floors as she pushed it through the automatic doors. The building felt enormous this early in the morning, empty yet humming with the subtle hum of air conditioning and distant elevators. To anyone walking past, it was just another day, another janitor quietly tending to spaces no one noticed. But for Emma, every sweep of the mop, every polished surface, was a step toward keeping her small world together. Her uniform, faded and washed too many times, hung loosely on her slender frame. The shoes she wore had lost most of their shine, the soles soft and worn from constant use. She bent over the lobby floor, her hands moving in practiced circles as she hummed softly to herself, a ritual that helped her hold back the frustration and loneliness that often accompanied her early shifts. Emma's life was far from easy. Her mother's heart condition meant that every paycheck went home to pay for medicine, leaving little for herself. Hunger was a constant companion, yet she refused to complain. Complaining didn't solve anything, and survival demanded quiet resilience. "Can you move faster, Emma? I'm almost stepping on your mop." The sharp voice of the receptionist broke her rhythm, pulling her into the harsh light of reality. Emma slid the bucket aside and whispered, "Sorry," her voice barely audible above the polished floor's soft echo. Minutes later, a group of office workers stormed in, their laughter loud and sharp, carrying the scent of expensive coffee and perfume. "She's still wearing that same uniform. Does she ever get a new one?" one woman asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. A man snorted in agreement. "Why bother? She's a janitor. Nobody looks at them." Emma lowered her gaze, pretending not to hear. Inside, her chest tightened. It always hurt, the invisibility, the constant reminders that her work, no matter how meticulous, was never enough to earn recognition or respect. She whispered to herself, "They don't know your story. It's okay." But it didn't stop the sting. It never did. Supervisor appeared, a short man with a sharp, impatient voice. "Emma, stay out of the main lobby today. The CEO might visit. Don't let him see you. You'll make the place look untidy." "Yes, sir," Emma replied, her voice quiet, almost blending into the air around her. She pushed her cart toward the less trafficked hallways, her eyes stinging. Not even her diligence could protect her presence from scrutiny. Poor, invisible, and cautious, this was the identity imposed upon her in a building full of suits and power. By mid-morning, Emma was on the 23rd floor, cleaning walls with her rag moving in small, precise circles. Humming helped the pain feel lighter, the endless grind of routine blur into something tolerable. But the quiet was shattered by hurried footsteps. "Move, Emma," a secretary snapped. "The CEO's coming up soon. Don't let him see you." Emma froze, then moved aside. Daniel Hartman, Billionaire CEO, was a man she had seen only once from a distance. Powerful, sharp, untouchable. People whispered about him in awe and fear. Emma did not dislike him, but she feared the weight of power he carried. Power rarely delivered kindness. She finished cleaning the hallway and wheeled her cart back toward the elevator, pressing the button and waiting. The doors opened to emptiness. She stepped aside, letting them close, thinking about her mother's voice message. "Emma, are you eating? Don't starve yourself for me." She smiled sadly. She had been starving herself, but her mother didn't need to know. She was about to turn back when a voice cut through the air, trembling and panicked. "Hello, is someone out there?" Emma froze. That wasn't a normal voice. It was fear. She pressed her ear closer. The elevator had stopped. "I'm stuck," the voice said. Her heart skipped. Daniel Hartman, the man everyone admired and feared. And now, in that confined metal box, he was vulnerable, human. "Alone, sir." she called softly, her hands instinctively touching the elevator doors. Thank God someone is there. Daniel's voice trembled. Please help me. Just stay calm. Don't go anywhere. Emma nodded, though he could not see her. She wasn't trained, wasn't an engineer, but memories of her father flashed in her mind. How he fixed broken machines at their small home, how he taught her to face problems instead of running from them. I'll try, she said. Just breathe, sir. Her voice surprised her. Calm, steady, commanding attention without being harsh. Somehow, in the face of fear, she had found authority. Daniel inhaled deeply. I'm trying, he said. Emma opened the side panel of the elevator and took out a long metal rod from her cart, recalling her father's advice. She twisted, pressed her body against the stubborn door. Her arms burned, her heart raced, but she didn't stop. Not for the whispers, not for the fear, not for herself. A click the door gave. Daniel, push, she called. Together, they forced the gap wider, groaned. Hearts pounded. The elevator finally yielded, sliding open to reveal pale, shaken Daniel, his suit slightly disheveled, his eyes wide with disbelief. You saved me, he whispered, staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. I just didn't want you to be scared, sir, she murmured. For a long moment, Daniel looked at her, really looked. The billionaire CEO, untouchable in his office and reputation, now humbled before a janitor whose life he had never noticed. Something shifted in him, a realization that power and wealth did not equal courage or humanity. Emma's small hands shook, the metal rod trembling between her fingers. Daniel's voice softened. I want to know your name. Emma Blake, she said quietly. Emma Blake, he repeated, a small sting of regret in his voice. I have walked past you so many times and never asked. She shook her head, almost apologetically. It's okay, sir. Anyone else would have done it. Daniel shook his head. No one else did. You stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. You have my respect, Emma. Real respect. The quiet was powerful, filling the space between them. Respect. Something money could not buy, something no promotion or title could grant. It had been earned in courage, in the willingness to act when fear could have justified inaction. You're sure you're okay? Emma asked softly, for the first time showing concern for the man in front of her. Yes, just shaken, he admitted. Elevators shouldn't be so dark or so quiet. Emma's gaze softened. I could hear it in your voice. You sounded scared. Daniel exhaled, a mix of amusement and acknowledgement. I was. Terrified, actually. For the first time, they saw each other as human, not as title, position, or social expectation. The CEO was vulnerable, the janitor was brave, and the hierarchy, which had always seemed so absolute, melted in that shared, electric moment. Daniel extended an invitation lunch. Emma froze, disbelief and hesitation painted across her face. She had eaten alone for years, never considered herself deserving of the company of anyone in the upper echelons. But Daniel was insistent, patient, kind. They walked through the hallways together, a visible defiance of the unspoken rules. Whispers followed them, but Daniel didn't flinch, still hesitant, kept her head slightly lowered, accustomed to invisibility. The contrast between their worlds, once unbridgeable, was narrowing with each step, a quiet revolution unfolding. By the time they reached the private restaurant, the setting was unfamiliar, almost intimidating for Emma. White tablecloths, polished cutlery, attentive waiters. She was a visitor in a world she had observed only from a distance. Daniel guided her gently, allowing her to settle with dignity, ensuring she didn't feel alien or out of place. Order anything, he said. Don't worry about the price. She shook her head. Just water. Daniel's soft insistence broke through her hesitation, encouraging her to accept nourishment without guilt. She ordered simply, a small step into indulgence she had denied herself for years. As they ate, they shared stories, slowly bridging the invisible chasm between privilege and struggle. Daniel admitted past mistakes, the ways he had overlooked humanity in favor of titles and power. Emma, cautious but earnest, spoke of her life, her family, her responsibilities. Every detail, every quiet revelation drew them closer, not romantically yet, but in mutual understanding and respect. By the time lunch ended, the shift had begun, not just in the building, but in hearts and minds. People who had sneered at Emma now regarded her differently. They had seen courage in a place they had always overlooked, and respect, once theoretical, became tangible. The day's events, starting with a stuck elevator and ending with shared meals and conversation, set the stage for change. Daniel recognized Emma's worth not because of her title, her uniform, or her station, because of the choices she made when it mattered most. The story was far from over, yet the foundation had been laid. Emma had acted without expectation, yet her bravery reshaped perceptions, earned admiration, and more importantly, demanded recognition. The power dynamics had shifted, if only subtly, but undeniably. The CEO had been saved, the janitor had risen, and in that moment, in the quiet between breaths, in the soft echoes of a lunch shared in mutual respect, the unspoken truth was clear: courage, empathy, and humanity mattered more than wealth, titles, or appearances. The next morning, Emma arrived at Jackson Tower before sunrise, her cleaning cart squeaking softly along the empty corridors. Her body moved automatically, each task familiar yet somehow heavier, as if the memory of the previous day's events lingered in the walls themselves. She could still feel Daniel Hartman's gaze, soft yet penetrating, when he had looked at her in the elevator. It was a gaze that weighed more than admiration. It carried acknowledgement, recognition, and a subtle promise that things might be different. She pushed her cart past the lobby, now buzzing quietly with early employees, whispers trailing behind her like shadows. Some glanced curiously, others avoided eye contact, unsure how to react. Emma lowered her head as usual, letting the polished floors and marble pillars shield her from judgment. A small spark inside told her this day would not be ordinary. The elevator that had once trapped Daniel seemed to hum quietly, almost as if waiting for her. She pressed the button for the 23rd floor, her fingers brushing against the familiar metal panel. The hum of the elevator was comforting, a reminder of routine, yet it also reminded her that yesterday had broken the boundaries she had thought impossible to cross. Meanwhile, Daniel arrived at his office earlier than usual, reviewing reports with a focus sharpened by the prior day's ordeal. Yet even amidst numbers and strategies, his thoughts drifted repeatedly to Emma, her hands, small but steady, her resolve unwavering, her presence quietly commanding respect. He realized that in his entire career, he had seen hundreds of employees, yet few had left an imprint as indelible as hers. There was something profoundly human about the courage she had shown, something that no amount of money, title, or office could replicate. When Emma reached the 23rd floor, her supervisor appeared unexpectedly, frowning and flustered. "Why are you here? Did you not hear? The CEO is coming down. You're supposed to be cleaning elsewhere." Before Emma could respond, Daniel's voice echoed from the stairwell. "I asked her to be here." The words carried authority, but not the authority of a manager enforcing rules. They carried recognition, validation. Emma froze, then slowly approached, her cart moving almost silently. The supervisors and staff on the floor watched, uncertain, as she walked past, the invisible barrier that had once defined her existence beginning to crumble. As she neared Daniel, elevator doors chimed softly behind them. The hallway seemed impossibly long, yet each step drew them closer. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, in ways that could not be measured. The staff whispered among themselves, unsure how to interpret the CEO walking beside a janitor. Some speculated, some feared scandal, and some simply stared, captivated by a scene that defied the social hierarchies they had learned to respect. Daniel spoke first, his voice calm yet commanding attention. "Yesterday, something happened that none of you witnessed. I was trapped in an elevator and scared. Everyone else froze or ignored the situation. But Emma Blake, this woman, stepped forward. She acted without hesitation, without expectation, without concern for herself. She saved me when no one else could or would." A hush fell over the room. Emma, usually invisible, felt the weight of every eye upon her. She lowered her gaze, instinctively shrinking, yet a quiet strength anchored her. The hallways, once vast and intimidating, now felt charged with electricity. "She is no longer just a janitor," Daniel continued. "She embodies courage, integrity, and humanity. And today, she will not only be recognized for her actions, but for the person she is. Everyone here should remember, respect is not reserved for titles, wealth, or position. Respect is earned, demonstrated, and observed in how we treat one another." Emma's chest tightened, but she didn't move. She wasn't used to such attention, and the sudden reversal of roles, from invisible to central, was almost overwhelming. But even as her mind spun, she understood something profound. Her courage had shifted the building's perception, had opened doors that had always seemed locked, not just for her, but for those willing to notice humanity in the overlooked. The assistant, tall and impeccably dressed, entered quietly, her expression a mixture of confusion and admiration. "Sir, the staff said you brought the janitor to your office. Came to ask if everything was." Daniel cut her off with a gentle, firm tone. "Close the door. Everything is as it should be. Emma has done more than her job. She has reminded me, and all of us, what it means to act with courage and heart." The assistant hesitated, then left, leaving the two alone. Emma took a small, careful breath. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, clenched lightly around her cart. The silence between them was not awkward. It was full of unspoken acknowledgement, of understanding, deep human connection forged in moments of fear and action. Daniel gestured toward his office, inviting her to follow. She hesitated, almost instinctively thinking of the rules, the hierarchy, the invisible walls that had always constrained her. Yet something in his gaze, soft yet insistent, urged her forward. Each step she took was a reclamation of agency, of recognition, self-worth. Inside his office, the atmosphere was different from what she had imagined. No gold fixtures, no ostentatious displays of wealth. The space was quiet, calm, almost lonely, yet it was an environment shaped by focus, intention, and order. Daniel moved to his desk, placing his phone down carefully. Emma lingered near the entrance, unsure how to act, how to be, in a world that had always excluded her. "You can come closer," he said softly, noticing her hesitation. She stepped forward slowly, careful not to disturb the order, careful not to make a mistake. Daniel pulled out a chair for her, insisting with quiet authority that she sit. She did, her back straight, hands clasped neatly in front of her. Daniel's eyes studied her, really studied her, in a way that few had ever done. He saw not only the janitor, poor woman in a uniform, but the quiet resilience, the intelligence, the bravery. Emma's posture, her hands, her gaze, all spoke volumes about the life she had endured, the challenges she had overcome, and the courage she had displayed in the face of fear. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice soft. Concern, not authority, informed her question. "Yes," he replied, though his voice betrayed the lingering tremor of yesterday's fear, just shaken. "Elevators shouldn't be so quiet or so dark." Emma's gaze softened. "I could hear it in your voice. You sounded scared." A small laugh escaped him, more a sigh than amusement. "Terrified," he admitted. "And you were calm." "I didn't want you to be scared," she murmured. The simplicity of the statement, the selflessness embedded in it, struck him with unexpected force. Daniel leaned back slightly, considering. "You've reminded me something I had forgotten. Beneath titles, beneath wealth, beneath power, humanity matters." Emma's heart softened. She had never thought a billionaire could recognize invisibility, could understand what it felt to be overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Yet here he was, humbled by her courage, acknowledging her worth in a way that transcended hierarchy. Their lunch was quiet at first, but gradually, stories unfolded. Daniel shared fragments of his youth, of the small shop where he had worked before wealth transformed him, of how ambition sometimes blinded him to humanity. Emma spoke cautiously, carefully revealing details of her own life, her responsibilities, her mother's illness, the sacrifices she made daily. Each revelation built connection, slowly bridging a gap that had once seemed impossible to cross. The contrast between them was stark: the CEO with wealth and power, accustomed to deference, the janitor invisible, navigating the world on courage and perseverance. Yet in that quiet space, those contrasts blurred, replaced by recognition of shared human experience: fear, responsibility, courage, hope, and resilience. As lunch ended, Daniel escorted Emma back toward the staff floor. Employees glanced, whispers filled the air, but their focus remained steady, deliberate. They moved with quiet dignity, demonstrating that respect could be earned not by title, but by action. Emma's supervisor approached afterward, unsure how to react. I didn't know. "I'm sorry for the way I spoke to you before," he said softly. She simply nodded, gentle but firm. "It's okay. Let's work better together from now on." Daniel watched, a faint smile touching his lips. This moment, the recognition, the subtle shift in perception, it was more than a promotion or accolade. It was the acknowledgement of worth, of courage, of heart. Emma returned to her routine, her body moving as it always had. Yet something inside her had shifted. The invisible walls had cracked. She was seen. She was recognized. And somewhere deep inside, Daniel understood that the value of a person could never be measured by uniform, title, or paycheck. And so the day progressed, ordinary on the surface, extraordinary beneath. Every polished floor, every quiet hallway, every glance carried the weight of yesterday, the promise of recognition, and the subtle reshaping of human connection within Jackson Tower. The following days at Jackson Tower felt different to Emma, though nothing outwardly had changed. She arrived at her usual early hour, pushing her squeaky cart through the polished floors. The building itself seemed charged with a new energy. Whispers followed her, subtle glances from staff who had once ignored her now carrying curiosity, caution, and a hint of admiration. It was as though the events of the previous day had rewritten the social rules, shifting invisible boundaries without a single word being spoken. Her routine unfolded with the same meticulous care, each sweep of the mop a quiet meditation. Yet, beneath the rhythmic motion, her mind replayed every detail from yesterday. The trapped elevator, Daniel's panicked voice, the way she had pressed the metal rod against the stubborn doors, the sound of the elevator groaning under their combined effort. She remembered the moment he had truly seen her, the gaze that stripped away all pretense, all hierarchy, and left only recognition and respect. That gaze had carved a space inside her, one she had not realized was empty, now filled with validation she had long been denied. By mid-morning, Daniel emerged from his office, not to attend meetings, not to review reports, but to find her. He navigated the corridors with a calm authority, a subtle acknowledgement of the changed dynamics. Staff instinctively moved aside, unsure whether to be in awe, confusion, or silent admiration. Daniel reached her side with a gentle nod. "Emma," he said quietly, and she looked up, startled, heart skipping. There was no demand in his tone, only quiet acknowledgement. "I want to thank you again," he continued, "for what you did. Not for the building, not for me, for stepping forward when courage was required. Emma shook her head, cheeks coloring with embarrassment. I just did what anyone should have," she murmured. "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone would have. You stayed when everyone else left. You acted when others hesitated. That matters." She swallowed, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Recognition was foreign, yet not unwelcome. It was as though the building itself had shifted to accommodate her bravery, each polished floor reflecting not just her labor, but her courage. That day, Daniel invited her to walk with him through the main lobby. The staff paused mid-task, uncertain how to respond. Some whispered, some stared, others exchanged nervous glances. Emma kept her head lowered, cart beside her, still tentative, still unused to the attention. Daniel's presence beside her created a subtle shield, a reassurance that she was no longer invisible and that the acts of bravery and integrity she had shown were worthy of being acknowledged. As they approached the executive elevator, Daniel stopped and looked at her. "Emma," he said softly, "yesterday changed a lot, but it's just the beginning. I want you to understand something important. Titles, uniforms, appearances, they don't define worth. Actions do. Courage does. Heart does. And you have all three." Emma's chest tightened at his words. She had never considered that her quiet, unnoticed life might have value outside her immediate responsibilities. She had worked tirelessly, cared for her mother, and endured the daily indignities of invisibility, all without expectation. And yet, here was someone with power, wealth, and influence telling her that her choices, her actions, and her character mattered profoundly. They stepped into the elevator together, the doors closing with a soft hum. Emma felt the unusual weight of presence beside her, the CEO, once untouchable, now walking quietly with her. It was a stark contrast, the powerful alongside the overlooked, the wealthy alongside the poor, the seen alongside the invisible. And yet, in that space, neither dominance nor submission dictated the interaction. Mutual respect held the room, quiet yet undeniable. Daniel spoke first, breaking the silence. "Yesterday, when I was trapped, I realized how often I have ignored humanity in favor of business, efficiency, and appearances. I forgot the lessons I learned as a young man, lessons about struggle, perseverance, and kindness." "You reminded me." Emma nodded slightly, understanding more than he could know. It was rare that people recognized unseen efforts, rarer still when acknowledgement came without condescension or reward. She had given her courage freely, expecting nothing, and the recognition she now received was profound because it was earned, not given. Lunch followed, in a quiet part of the building few employees ever saw. White tablecloths, polished silverware, and attentive staff surrounded them. Yet the world outside this small enclave ceased to exist. Emma sat carefully, hands folded, observing the details, the faint scent of flowers on the table, the gentle hum of the music, the soft clatter of utensils. Everything seemed foreign, yet the comfort lay not in luxury, but in the shared experience, the unspoken acknowledgement that she had stepped into a world she had never imagined. Not because she sought entry, because she earned it. Daniel watched her closely, noting her quiet dignity. She ate slowly, appreciating each bite, not out of necessity, but as a small affirmation of her worth. "This is amazing," she murmured quietly, almost to herself. "You deserve it," he replied softly, not with wealth or power, but with the sincerity of recognition. "You've carried burdens that others might crumble under, and yet you faced fear, uncertainty, and invisibility with grace." The conversation unfolded naturally. Each story exchanged a bridge between worlds. Daniel shared fragments of his past, days working in small shops, lifting boxes, sweeping floors, being ignored and underestimated. Emma listened, seeing in him a reflection of her own struggles, albeit in a different context. When he spoke, he revealed vulnerability, a willingness to acknowledge mistakes and growth. Emma spoke of her mother, the expenses, the sacrifices, and the relentless grind of survival. Each word carried weight, but also resilience, intelligence, and strength. The lunch, simple on the surface, became a powerful testament to human dignity. Actions mattered more than titles, courage mattered more than status, heart mattered more than wealth. By the end of the meal, the subtle transformation within the building was palpable. Staff who had once whispered and sneered now observed in silence, curiosity mingling with respect. Emma's visibility had shifted the atmosphere, demonstrating that courage and integrity could quietly rewrite social hierarchies. Returning to the staff floor, Daniel accompanied her, walking slowly, deliberately, ensuring that her presence was both acknowledged and normalized. The whispers continued, but the tone had changed. There was awe, not mockery. Recognition, not scorn. Emma kept her head slightly lowered, but the weight she carried, of invisibility, undervaluation felt lighter. Her supervisor approached, unsure, hesitant. I didn't realize, he began. His voice softened, tinged with genuine remorse. Emma shook her head gently, the gesture signaling acceptance, not confrontation. It's okay. Let's work better together from now on, she said quietly. Daniel observed from a distance, noting the small yet profound shifts in behavior. The building itself seemed transformed, the invisible boundaries of hierarchy and perception altered not by decree, but by courage, empathy, and action. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of the elevator incident remained vivid, both for Emma and for Daniel. It became a reference point, a story whispered among staff, a reminder of the profound impact a single act of courage could have. Emma continued her duties, yet her perspective shifted. She no longer saw herself merely as a janitor, invisible and dismissed. She recognized her own value, her ability to influence, her capacity for courage, and the respect she could inspire. Daniel, too, changed. His approach to leadership evolved subtly, yet meaningfully. Meetings were conducted with greater awareness of individual contributions, of the humanity behind each employee. He walked the floors more often, acknowledging those who had been overlooked, ensuring that recognition was given where earned, and that respect was a standard, not a privilege. Emma's confidence grew, but never arrogance. She moved through the building with the same quiet grace, yet with a sense of belonging that had previously been denied. Her interactions with staff carried authority born of experience and earned respect, not fear or title. She had stepped forward when it mattered, and the echoes of that action reverberated throughout the building. One afternoon, as she polished the floors near the executive offices, Daniel approached once more. "Emma," he said gently. She looked up, heart skipping, expecting another request or instruction, but instead, he offered something unexpected. A simple, sincere acknowledgement. "You've reminded me, and everyone here, what it means to act with courage. You've earned more than recognition. You've inspired change." Emma's hands trembled slightly, not from the physical labor, but from the emotional weight of his words. Inspiration, acknowledgement, and respect. These were luxuries she had never imagined possible. Yet here they were, offered freely, earned through integrity and courage. That evening, Emma left the building later than usual, her cart lighter, her heart heavier in the sense of responsibility and empowerment. She paused for a moment in the lobby, looking at the polished marble, the golden lights, the familiar doors. This building, once a symbol of hierarchy, invisibility, and struggle, had become a space where courage and humanity redefined the rules. The following morning, Jackson Tower seemed alive in a way Emma had never experienced. The staff moved through their routines. There was a subtle shift in how eyes followed her path. Glances that once dismissed her now carried hesitation, curiosity, and even respect. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to some, but Emma felt it deeply. Every step through the polished corridors reminded her that yesterday's courage had not only changed her life, but had created ripples through the building that no one could ignore. She began her early tasks with quiet determination, wiping down counters, polishing floors, and ensuring every corner of the lobby gleamed under her careful attention. Each motion, though habitual, carried a newfound sense of purpose. This was not just cleaning, this was reclamation of her own dignity and, in some ways, humanity of those around her. Daniel Hartman arrived soon after, stepping out of his office with his usual calm yet commanding presence. The buzz among staff grew immediately, whispers rippling through the halls. But Daniel's focus was unwavering as he approached Emma, offering a nod that felt like a shield of assurance. "Good morning, Emma," he said softly. "Good morning, sir," she replied, her voice carrying a mix of respect and subtle awe. "I want you to know," he continued, "what you did for me, the courage you showed, means more than words can convey. And it's not just about me. It's about every person here. You've reminded us that humanity exists in every corner, even the ones we overlook." Emma's hands froze for a brief moment, holding her mop mid-sweep. She blinked, taken aback by the gravity of his words. Recognition was rare. Acknowledgement from a man of his stature was extraordinary. Yet she remained grounded, aware that her actions were not about accolades, but about doing what was right, even when no one was watching. As they spoke, a small group of employees gathered discreetly, their curiosity palpable. Some dared to whisper, others only stared, unsure of how to navigate this unusual scene. Emma lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of attention. Yet a quiet confidence settled within her. She had acted with courage, and now the world seemed to acknowledge it. Daniel gestured toward the main lobby, inviting Emma to walk with him. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Whispers and glances followed them, but Daniel's presence beside her offered reassurance. Each step was deliberate, bridging the gap between two worlds that had always seemed separate. The CEO's realm of power and wealth, and the janitor's world of quiet resilience and struggle. "Yesterday changed more than just my perspective," Daniel said softly. "It reminded me that true leadership is not in titles or wealth, but in recognizing courage, integrity, and humanity wherever it exists." Emma nodded, absorbing the words. She had always understood the value of courage in action, but rarely had someone of such influence recognized it so profoundly. The contrast between her world and his could not have been starker. She, the overlooked janitor, and he, untouchable billionaire CEO, and yet the boundaries between them blurred in that moment. Their conversation flowed naturally, with Daniel sharing glimpses of his past, his early days working in a small shop, lifting boxes, and sweeping floors, often ignored and underestimated. Emma listened intently, recognizing a reflection of her own struggles in his story. She shared pieces of her life as well, speaking of her mother's illness, the sacrifices she made, and the relentless grind of her daily existence. Each exchange deepened the connection between them, creating a bridge built on empathy, understanding, and shared human experience. As they moved through the building, staff members continued to watch, unsure of how to interpret the scene. Some whispered about potential scandal or misbehavior, while others simply observed in quiet awe. Still cautious, kept her head slightly lowered, accustomed to invisibility, yet each step forward reinforced her newfound recognition. By mid-morning, Daniel guided Emma toward a small, private area of the building she had never noticed before. The space was quiet and serene, a stark contrast to the bustling corridors outside. Soft music played, and sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating every detail. The environment felt carefully curated, not for luxury, but for reflection and focus. "Sit," Daniel said gently, pulling out a chair for her. Emma hesitated for a moment, then accepted, placing her hands neatly in her lap. The gesture was simple, yet profound, signaling a shift in their dynamic. Here, in this quiet space, the hierarchy that had defined their interactions seemed irrelevant. What mattered was courage, integrity, and the ability to act when it mattered most. Daniel studied her closely, noting the strength in her posture, the intelligence in her eyes, and the quiet dignity she carried despite years of invisibility. "You've reminded me," he said softly, "that respect is earned through action, not granted through title or wealth." Emma's chest tightened. Recognition had always been rare, yet in this moment, it was accompanied by sincerity, validation, and an unspoken promise that her courage mattered. She realized that her actions had not only saved a life, but had also shifted the way the building, and perhaps Daniel himself, viewed humanity and worth. Lunch followed shortly after, in a private section of the building's restaurant. Emma sat carefully, taking in the surroundings, polished tables, neatly arranged silverware, and attentive staff. The setting, though unfamiliar, was made comforting by Daniel's calm presence. He encouraged her to eat without hesitation, to accept nourishment without guilt. "You deserve this," he said quietly. "You've carried burdens and faced fear that most would avoid. Your courage has changed everything." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she accepted a simple meal, the warmth of the food a small, yet meaningful affirmation of her worth. Each bite was a quiet reminder that her actions had consequences far beyond her immediate perception, that courage and integrity could reshape perceptions, inspire change, and command recognition. Conversation flowed naturally, with stories exchanged, laughter shared, and moments of quiet reflection. Daniel spoke candidly about his past mistakes, his moments of oversight, and his journey to understanding the value of humanity in leadership. Emma, in turn, shared her personal struggles, her resilience, and her unwavering commitment to her responsibilities. Each exchange reinforced the bond between them, built not on wealth or status, but on mutual understanding, respect, and empathy. By the time they returned to the staff floor, the subtle transformation in the building was evident. Employees who had previously dismissed or whispered about Emma now observed with a mix of curiosity, respect, and cautious admiration. Invisible barriers of hierarchy had been subtly altered, and the building itself seemed to acknowledge the impact of courage and integrity. Her supervisor approached once more, uncertainty in his expression. I didn't realize," he began, but Emma shook her head gently. "It's okay. Let's work better together from now on," she said, her tone calm, accepting, yet firm. Daniel observed the exchange from a distance, noting the subtle shifts in behavior, the recognition of courage, and the quiet impact of Emma's actions. The building itself seemed transformed, a space where hierarchy was secondary to humanity, and where courage and integrity could inspire change in ways that titles, wealth, or authority could not. In the days that followed, Emma continued her duties with renewed purpose. She moved through the building with quiet confidence, each task a reminder of the recognition she had earned and the respect she had inspired. Staff members treated her differently, not out of fear or obligation, but out of acknowledgement of the courage she had demonstrated. Daniel's approach to leadership evolved as well. Meetings included recognition of individual contributions, attention to the humanity behind each employee, and a commitment to fostering a culture where courage, integrity, and respect were paramount. He walked the floors more often, acknowledging those who had been overlooked, ensuring that recognition and respect were given where earned. Emma's life, while still grounded in responsibility and sacrifice, carried a new sense of possibility. The invisible walls that had constrained her presence, her recognition, and her influence had been breached. She moved through the building with a quiet dignity, aware of her value and the capacity to inspire change through courage and action. Even in moments of routine, polishing floors, arranging chairs, cleaning windows. Emma carried the memory of the elevator, the lunch, and the recognition that followed. The world seemed different, not because the building had changed, but because the perceptions of those within it had shifted. Courage, action, and humanity had redrawn the social map, creating spaces where recognition and respect could flourish regardless of title or status. Daniel watched quietly as she moved through the lobby, each step a subtle testament to the power of integrity, courage, and selfless action. He knew that the events of the past days had altered not only her life, but the culture of the building itself. Employees who had once whispered or dismissed her now carried a new awareness, a reminder that human worth is revealed through action, not assigned through hierarchy or wealth. The connection between them grew steadily, a bond forged not through proximity or convenience, through shared experience, mutual respect, and acknowledgement of courage. Daniel understood that leadership required recognition of humanity in all its forms, and Emma understood that courage, even when unnoticed, profound, lasting impact. And so, the building continued to operate. Polished floors gleaming under Emma's careful attention, the elevators moving with quiet precision, and the staff performing their duties with a renewed awareness. But beneath the surface, a quiet transformation persisted, one born of courage, recognition, and the human capacity to act with integrity when it matters most. The following week began quietly, but Emma could sense the change in the building immediately. Staff moved with a subtle tension, an awareness of her presence that hadn't existed before. Whispers had diminished, replaced by glances tinged with respect, cautious curiosity, and in some cases, silent admiration. She had always been invisible, overlooked, dismissed, and yet now she moved through the hallways as if a new, invisible force shielded her. A recognition that courage and integrity could not be ignored. Emma approached her usual cleaning tasks with the same meticulous care, but her mind was more alert, more alive to the subtle dynamics around her. Each step on the polished marble, each sweep of the mop, carried not only the weight of responsibility, but the newfound gravity of influence. People were watching her, yes, but not in judgment. They were watching her because she had acted when action mattered, because she had displayed courage that even the most powerful failed to muster in a moment of crisis. Daniel Hartman, meanwhile, had taken subtle but deliberate steps to reshape the culture of Jackson Tower. His office was no longer just a center of control. It had become a hub of awareness, a space where the humanity of the staff mattered as much as their productivity. Daniel walked the floors with quiet attention, observing interactions, listening carefully, and noting those who demonstrated integrity, courage, or empathy. Emma had set an example, and the building itself seemed to follow her lead. One morning, as Emma polished the floor near the executive elevators, Daniel appeared beside her once more. "Emma," he said softly, and she looked up, startled by the sound of his calm, steady voice. There was no urgency in it, no directive, just acknowledgement. "I wanted to check in, to see how you're feeling after everything that's happened." Emma paused, leaning on her mop.
I'm fine, sir,"
she replied quietly, though her voice carried a trace of uncertainty. She had grown accustomed to invisibility, to the expectation that her feelings didn't matter, and it took a moment to realize that someone actually cared. Daniel said gently, "But I want you to know this. Your actions didn't just affect me. They've created a ripple. People are seeing, really seeing, what courage looks like. And it matters." Emma lowered her gaze, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. Recognition had always been rare, and acknowledgement from someone of Daniel's stature was almost overwhelming. Yet she understood the truth in his words. The building had shifted, the staff had shifted, and she had set that change in motion, not through ambition, but through selfless courage. As they spoke, The doors to the lobby opened, and employees began arriving in trickles. Emma noticed subtle changes, whispers that once carried judgment now carried curiosity, hesitant acknowledgement, or tentative respect. People moved with more care around her, conscious of her presence in a way that had never existed before. Daniel continued, his voice quiet but commanding attention. Yesterday, Emma reminded me, and all of us, that true strength is measured not by wealth or title, but by courage, integrity, and heart. What you did was remarkable, not because it saved me, but because it revealed who you are. And that, Emma, is something no title or paycheck can teach. Emma's heart tightened at his words. She had never considered that her life, her choices, and her small acts of courage could carry such weight. She had acted without expectation, without anticipation of reward or recognition. And yet, in the quiet acknowledgement from the most powerful person in the building, she felt the profound weight of her own value. Later that morning, Emma received an unexpected visitor, her supervisor. He approached hesitantly, hands clasped in front of him, uncertainty etched across his face. "Emma," he began, his voice softer than usual, "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you before. I didn't realize, and I've been unfair." Emma paused, considering his words. She could have responded with anger, with resentment, or with silence. But instead, she chose understanding. "It's okay," she said quietly, gently. "Let's work better together from now on." Her tone was calm, accepting yet firm, a reflection of the dignity she had carried throughout years of invisibility. Daniel watched from a distance, noting the subtle changes in behavior and demeanor. The building itself seemed altered, not through decree or enforcement, but through courage and recognition. The staff were beginning to see, truly see, that integrity and bravery could transcend hierarchy, challenge assumptions, and inspire lasting change. By midday, Emma had returned to the 23rd floor, her routine both familiar and subtly transformed. She moved through the space with quiet confidence, aware that her actions had reshaped perceptions, that her courage had not only saved a life, but had altered the building's culture. Employees who had once dismissed or mocked her now treated her with caution, respect, or admiration, and the knowledge of that recognition added weight and purpose to each task she performed. Daniel observed the building from his office, reflecting on the subtle shifts he had seen. The employees' interactions were different, quieter, more attentive, more human. Whispers of judgment had faded, replaced by recognition of effort, bravery, and integrity. Emma had become a quiet catalyst, a force reshaping the social and cultural fabric of Jackson Tower. Later that afternoon, Daniel called Emma to his office. She approached with cautious anticipation, unsure of what he would ask or say. The office was quiet, the air thick with unspoken acknowledgement. Daniel gestured toward a chair. "Sit," he said softly. Emma obeyed, hands folded neatly in her lap. Daniel studied her, truly studied her. The lines of endurance on her face, the strength in her posture, the quiet intelligence in her eyes. "Emma," he began, "what you've done has shown me something I had forgotten. Leadership is not about power, control, or authority. It's about recognizing courage, integrity, and humanity wherever it exists. And you've reminded me of that in ways I will never forget." Emma's chest tightened, the weight of recognition settling heavily, yet warmly on her shoulders. She had acted without expectation. Yet the acknowledgement from someone of Daniel's stature affirmed the profound truth. She had always known courage matters, integrity matters, heart matters, and in the quiet, subtle ways, these qualities could reshape worlds. The conversation flowed naturally, with Daniel asking about her life, her family, and her responsibilities. Emma shared cautiously, revealing the challenges of caring for her mother, managing her finances, and enduring the subtle indignities of invisibility. Daniel listened intently, acknowledging her experiences, validating her emotions and recognizing the depth of her resilience. By the end of the conversation, a plan began to take shape, not just in words, but in action. Daniel recognized that Emma's courage, her insight, and her integrity were assets not only to him, but to the building as a whole. He began to consider ways to formalize her influence, to ensure that her abilities were recognized, valued, and utilized in meaningful ways. The days that followed saw subtle but significant changes. Emma's responsibilities expanded in small increments, guided by her skill and judgment. Staff interactions shifted further as recognition of her courage became embedded in the building's culture. Daniel observed, silently approving, as the ripple effect of one act of bravery began to transform a workplace once defined by hierarchy and invisibility into a space that valued action, integrity, and humanity. The weeks that followed were a subtle revolution in Jackson Tower. The building, once a space of rigid hierarchies and invisible walls, seemed to breathe differently. Every polished floor, every pristine hallway, every carefully arranged office now carried a faint but undeniable hum of respect and awareness. Emma Blake, once overlooked, became a quiet force, a catalyst for change. The staff moved with a cautious awareness of her presence, yet not with fear or obligation, only recognition. She arrived early each morning, pushing her squeaky cart through the lobby. Now the air seemed charged with something unfamiliar anticipation. It wasn't a sense of reward, nor recognition in the superficial sense. It was subtle acknowledgement, silent approval from people who had once dismissed her. Whispers of gossip had faded, replaced by glances of curiosity, cautious respect, and tentative admiration. Emma felt it in the soft hum of the elevators, in the way sunlight reflected off the polished marble, in the subtle tilt of heads as she passed. Daniel Hartman, meanwhile, had quietly reshaped the culture of his company. His office, once a domain of authority and efficiency, had become a hub of awareness. He walked the corridors frequently, observing, listening, and noting acts of courage and integrity among his staff. Emma's heroism had set an example. Daniel understood that her impact was greater than a single action. It had become a framework for culture, an invisible blueprint for behavior in the building. One morning, Emma found herself on the 23rd floor, cleaning as usual, when Daniel appeared beside her. He did not approach with urgency, nor with directives, but with calm acknowledgement. "Emma," he said softly. She looked up, startled, her heart skipping. There was no demand in his tone, only recognition. "I wanted to see how you're doing today, after everything that has happened." Emma paused, leaning on her mop. "I am fine, sir," she replied quietly, though her voice carried a hint of uncertainty. She had spent years invisible, took time to realize that someone genuinely cared. "Good," Daniel said gently. "I want you to know this. Your courage didn't just affect me. It's changed the building. People are seeing, truly seeing, what courage looks like. And it matters." Emma lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of his words. Recognition had always been rare. Acknowledgement from someone of Daniel's stature was extraordinary. Yet she understood the truth in his statement. The building had shifted, perceptions had changed, and her courage had set the motion. That afternoon, a group of employees approached cautiously. They had observed Emma's actions during the elevator incident and the lunch that followed. Whispers were tentative, questions framed carefully. "Is it true she saved him?" one asked quietly. Another nodded, eyes wide. "I saw it. She didn't run. She didn't hesitate." Emma listened silently, not out of pride, but with quiet awareness. The story of her bravery had begun to ripple through the building, shifting assumptions and perceptions. People were beginning to understand that actions mattered more than status, that courage and integrity could rewrite social dynamics in subtle but profound ways. Later that day, Daniel called Emma to his office. She approached cautiously, unsure of what awaited. The office was quiet, the air filled with unspoken acknowledgement. Daniel gestured toward a chair. "Sit," he said softly. Emma complied, placing her hands neatly in her lap. Daniel studied her closely, noticing the subtle strength in her posture, the intelligence in her gaze, and the quiet dignity she carried despite years of invisibility. "Emma," he began, "your actions have shown me something I had forgotten. Leadership isn't about authority or control. It's about recognizing courage, integrity, and humanity wherever it exists. You've reminded me of that in a way I will never forget." Emma felt her chest tighten. She had acted without expectation, yet the acknowledgement from someone so powerful affirmed a profound truth: courage matters. Integrity matters. Heart matters. And in small, subtle ways, these qualities could reshape worlds. The conversation flowed naturally, with Daniel asking about her family, her responsibilities, and her daily life. Emma shared cautiously, revealing the challenges of caring for her mother, managing finances, and enduring the daily indignities of invisibility. Daniel listened, acknowledging her experiences and validating her resilience. By the end of their conversation, a plan had begun to form. Daniel recognized Emma's courage, insight, and integrity as invaluable assets, not only to him but to the building as a whole. He considered ways to formalize her influence, ensuring her abilities were recognized, valued, and utilized in meaningful ways. The following days saw small, deliberate changes. Emma's responsibilities expanded subtly, guided by her judgment and skill. Staff interactions shifted further as recognition of her courage became embedded in the building's culture. Daniel observed, approving silently, as the ripple effect of one act of bravery began transforming the workplace. One afternoon, Emma was polishing floors near the executive offices when Daniel approached. "Emma," he said softly, "what you've done has shown me something important. You've reminded me that recognition must be given where it's due, that integrity and courage shape more than outcomes. They shape people, culture, and perception. You've inspired change, quietly but profoundly." Emma's hands trembled slightly, the weight of acknowledgement settling heavily, yet warmly on her shoulders. She had acted without expectation, yet the result was profound. Recognition and respect had flowed to her naturally, earned through courage and integrity, and the building itself seemed to reflect the shift. Over the next several days, Emma noticed further subtle transformations. Staff members who had once whispered, laughed, or ignored her now moved with measured respect. Their behavior was not performative nor driven by fear, but by genuine recognition of courage and integrity. Emma carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of her influence and responsibility. Daniel's leadership had evolved alongside her own transformation. Meetings included recognition of individual contributions, with attention to the humanity behind each employee. His walks through the building were deliberate, acknowledging effort, courage, and empathy wherever they occurred. Emma had become a quiet model, demonstrating the power of action over title, integrity over hierarchy, over complacency. Even in the mundane tasks, polishing floors, cleaning windows, arranging chairs, Emma carried the memory of the elevator incident, the lunch, and the acknowledgement that followed. She had acted without expectation, yet the world had shifted in response. Courage had rewritten dynamics, inspired recognition, created subtle cultural change. The bond between Daniel and Emma continued to deepen. Not romantic, but rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and acknowledgement of the profound impact of courage. He recognized that leadership required seeing the humanity in all people, and she recognized that courage, even when unnoticed, influenced worlds. Weeks passed, and Jackson Tower operated smoothly, but beneath the surface, change persisted. Polished floors reflected not only physical labor, but the integrity, resilience, and courage of those who occupied the building. Staff interactions became more thoughtful, more human, and more aware of the power of acknowledgement. Emma, once invisible, moved through the building with quiet dignity, aware of her own value and the capacity to inspire change. Daniel observed, quietly approving, as her presence continued to influence behavior and perception. The whispers that had once dismissed her were replaced by admiration and acknowledgement. Her actions, carried out without expectation, had become a model for courage and integrity, reshaping the culture of the building from within. One afternoon, Daniel called Emma to his office once more. "Emma," he said softly, "I want to formalize what you've already proven. Your courage, judgment, and integrity are invaluable. I want to offer you a role that reflects not only your abilities, but the impact you've had on this building." Emma's heart raced. She had anticipated recognition, perhaps a gesture of thanks, but this was unexpected. Her hands trembled slightly as she listened, realizing that her actions were now creating tangible change in her professional life, as well as in the culture around her. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she absorbed Daniel's words. A formal role, recognition, responsibility, for someone like her who had spent years being invisible, who had quietly carried burdens without complaint. It was almost unimaginable. She swallowed hard, looking down at the polished floor, gathering courage that she had shown countless times before. And yet this was different. This wasn't a trapped elevator, a single act of heroism. It was a recognition that would change her life. I don't know what to say, sir," she whispered, her voice low and tinged with awe. "I never asked for anything. I just did what I had to do." Daniel shook his head gently, his expression calm but firm. "Emma, that's exactly why this matters. You didn't act for recognition or reward. You acted out of courage, integrity, and empathy. That is the rarest quality in the world. And it's why I want you in a position where your decisions, judgment, and insight can benefit more than just me. It can benefit the entire building, the staff, the operations, and even the culture itself." Blinked rapidly, heart pounding. A role that mattered, a voice that mattered. No longer invisible, no longer overlooked, no longer dismissed. Yet even as exhilaration surged, doubt crept in. She was painfully aware of her limited formal education, the assumptions others might make, and the way some employees had treated her. I don't have degrees," she murmured, voice cracking slightly. Daniel smiled softly, almost pityingly, but in a warm, respectful way. "Degrees can teach knowledge. Experience can teach skill. But what you have, courage, responsibility, heart, cannot be taught. And that is exactly what this building, this company, and the people in it need." Emma's hands clenched, a mixture of fear, excitement, and disbelief swirling in her chest. She had lived a life of quiet labor, never expecting that one act of bravery could ripple through her world and touch even someone like Daniel Hartman. Yet here he was, offering her a role, acknowledging her worth, validating her courage, and setting the stage for a future she had never dared to imagine. "I don't know if I can do it," she said softly, almost to herself. "You already have," Daniel replied. "Every decision, every act, every moment of courage you've displayed has prepared you for this. You just need to step into the role." Emma nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat. It wasn't just the promotion. It was the acknowledgement that her actions mattered, that her courage could inspire others, that her humanity was seen, recognized, and respected. She had saved a life, yes, but in doing so, she had reshaped perceptions, influenced behavior, and become a quiet symbol of integrity and resilience. The days that followed saw subtle but profound changes. Daniel implemented structural shifts, formalizing Emma's new responsibilities as assistant facility supervisor. Her duties expanded, giving her oversight of building operations, safety checks, and maintenance planning. She became a point of reference for staff, a trusted voice whose judgment mattered. Those who had once dismissed her now sought her insight, cautiously at first, then with genuine respect. Emma navigated the new responsibilities with quiet determination. She was meticulous, deliberate, and careful. Yet each decision carried the weight of someone who had acted bravely under pressure. She coordinated maintenance schedules, resolved conflicts, and ensured safety protocols were followed, all while quietly demonstrating leadership, empathy, and fairness. Her presence transformed the staff's perception of themselves, their roles, and the value of courage and integrity in the workplace. Meanwhile, Daniel observed closely, ensuring that her contributions were recognized not through favoritism, but through merit. He understood that her rise wasn't just about one act of heroism, it was about the sustained demonstration of character, judgment. Emma became a quiet exemplar, showing that influence and impact are earned through courage and integrity, not wealth, title, or hierarchy. The building itself seemed to shift with her presence. Employees, once consumed by gossip, hierarchy, and superficial judgments, began to pay attention to actions rather than appearances. Respect and recognition became grounded in merit, not status. Whispers of derision faded, replaced by acknowledgement of effort, bravery, and insight. The culture of the building was changing, and Emma, once invisible, was at the heart of that transformation. One afternoon, Daniel called her to his office for a meeting that would solidify her new role. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit, Emma. Today, we finalize the transition. I want your voice, your judgment, and your courage to guide the operations and culture of this building. You've already proven your worth beyond doubt." Emma lowered herself into the chair, hands folded neatly in her lap. She felt the weight of responsibility settle over her. Not oppressive, but grounding. This was her moment to step fully into the recognition she had earned, to shape the culture she had quietly begun to influence, and to continue demonstrating the courage and integrity that had first brought Daniel's attention. Her mind briefly flashed to her mother and the sacrifices that had shaped her life. She had carried burdens, endured hardship, and lived a life defined by responsibility and quiet perseverance. And now, that life, shaped by courage and resilience, was opening doors she had never imagined. She felt a mixture of pride, fear, and exhilaration, knowing that every decision she made from this point forward carried weight and significance. Daniel spoke again, his voice calm and sincere. "Emma, the role comes with authority, but also responsibility. You will oversee operations, guide staff, and ensure safety and efficiency. But more than that, you will model the behavior we hope to see: courage, integrity, empathy, and respect. You've already shown these qualities. Now, you will amplify them." Emma nodded, absorbing the gravity of the moment. She realized that this promotion was more than a personal acknowledgement. It was a statement to the entire building. Courage and integrity mattered. Humanity mattered. Actions mattered more than title, wealth, or status. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, respected, and positioned to inspire change. Over the next several days, she began her new responsibilities, quietly yet deliberately influencing the staff. She approached each interaction with thoughtfulness, fairness, and a keen sense of awareness. She resolved conflicts with empathy, made decisions with integrity, and guided operations with precision. Her influence grew steadily, not through power or authority, but through recognition of her judgment, courage, and insight. Employees, once dismissive or indifferent, began to emulate her behavior. Subtle shifts in culture emerged, as respect became grounded in action rather than hierarchy. The building itself seemed to respond, moving with a quiet, deliberate awareness of human value, courage, and integrity. Daniel observed these changes, noting how Emma's leadership, grounded in courage and character, had transformed the dynamics of Jackson Tower. He recognized that her influence extended far beyond operational efficiency. She was reshaping perceptions, inspiring respect, and creating a culture that valued humanity above status. And through it all, Emma remained grounded. She remembered the elevator, the fear, the uncertainty, and the courage that had defined her actions. She carried that memory as a reminder that true influence is earned through integrity, bravery, and humanity, and that recognition, while powerful, is a reflection of sustained courage rather than a reward for a single act. By the time the building settled into its new rhythm, Emma had become more than a janitor, turned assistant supervisor. She was a symbol, quiet, deliberate, and profound, of courage, resilience, and integrity. Her actions had demonstrated that even in the most hierarchical, rigid environments, human worth is revealed through courage, empathy,